Hi, my name's James Fowl and this is the Huxley Morton podcast. I hope you're enjoying series 3 so far, and before we jump back in for another episode, I'd love it if you could like, subscribe and hit that notifications button, as it really helps us to increase our reach. We run the show to both help and inspire those working in clinical research, so if there's anyone else that you think would benefit from tuning in, please spread the word. For now though, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Huxley Morton podcast, the show where each week we speak to pharma company owners and industry leaders who have given up some of their time to share both their personal and professional journeys. This week, we're joined by Pharma Provocateur and CEO of Impatient Health, Mr. Paul Sims. I've also got on board Adam Walker, biometrics consultant, joining me as a co-host.
Hi, James.
I've been looking forward to this one, guys. So look, Paul, I've given you a bit of an intro there, and we were just talking off air how I've not been able to almost avoid you during my time in the world of working in pharma recruitment. Adam, however, hasn't come across you on LinkedIn, which is, I find, hard to believe. So who is the man behind Pharma Provocateur?
Clearly, I'm some kind of stalker, aren't I, James? And I've clearly been following you around, and I've yet to get on to Adam. But the day job is I'm in charge of Impatient Health, which is an organization I started up at the end of last year, the end of 2020. Most people recognize me from my time in charge of a company called Pharma, which was then bought by Reuters in October 2019. And in that role, we kind of started from scratch and built up to what I think was probably the largest and most influential of all of the pharma events and conferences. So lots of people obviously know me from just being a part of those. And I guess I'm very lucky. I consider myself very lucky to have been able to get, form friendships and relationships with the sort of top table of our industry, which of course, as we've moved into the pandemic, has become a pretty important industry for the world, really having to save the world, I would say. And really, what I'm doing now is just a chance to sort of roll up my sleeves. I feel like I've been talking for so long about innovation, of disruption, of the various different things that our industry needs to do, the evolution and the unfulfilled potential that we still have. And I just wanted to get my hands dirty. I'm a natural doer, builder of things. And, I wanted to just get out there and work with genuinely interesting companies doing genuinely needle moving stuff in healthcare. And that's not everybody. I mean, a lot of people kind of sit in this industry and unfortunately sort of treat it as a very safe place to ride out a career. There are, however, some people who are absolutely determined to do whatever it takes to bring better health to the world. And, being able to choose who I work with and work with those people on different projects is really quite fantastic. If there's any issue in my life, it's the lack of sleep, and I've got zero kind of economy of scale. Everything that I'm working on is quite different from everything else. So big variety, lots of fun, totally kind of random though, and probably pulls me in far too many directions all at the same time.
Wow. Well, it's certainly from my side, one of the things you mentioned there was the innovation. And this is, I think, what really has drew me to your profile when seeing some of your posts through LinkedIn in the past. They were just so out there, kind of, I was finding it hard to get my head around what you do. So in terms of understand the background, working for events, Reuters, and that's how, you're well connected, networked within the industry. Inpatient health, where does the innovation come in? What is the sole purpose? What are you guys trying to achieve as a business?
Well, I do probably spend about 20% of my time trying to be the pharma provocateur, as we've just described it, because I find that most of the information that's given by companies in our industry is some form of content marketing or PR. Yeah. And I just think that there's far too much of that in our industry. There's not enough sort of neutral and independent comment. I would even say there's a dearth of good journalism in our sector. I think there's a couple of people who are shining the light, but probably 80% of it, even 90%, is really not that great. Yeah. So I very much describe myself as an independent, and I do that because, firstly, that's a value in itself. But secondly, I'm here to genuinely drive the conversation forward. And if that means that in the course of making an omelette, I'm going to break a few eggs, I am very happy to do that. In fact, I don't think I'm doing it properly unless I break a few eggs. And I'll win a lot more than I lose by being as provocative, because the key thing is it's not important to be right all the time. It's important often to just be able to have the conversation. And if you don't kind of throw out a few ideas and a few challenges, you're never even going to get to that quality of conversation. So I think it's absolutely really important. And this is where I think I differ from most people who worried about their image, worried about whether they're saying the right thing or not. I'm not here to be right. One of the main things I do is I produce predictions. By definition, most of them will be wrong, right? But just by throwing them out there, getting us to think about the future. Whenever we write a business plan, we're kind of imagining, we have a vision of what we're trying to create. And so producing predictions and throwing out ideas is essential to being able to put together good plans, good ideas of what to aim for. And right now, if there's anything we need in our very uncertain environment that's happening post-pandemic, it's having strong and experimental visions that can actually drive ourselves forward. Now is the chance to experiment in many ways.
Can I just jump in on that? You raised a couple of really interesting points there, Paul, and thank you for explaining that. I'm just wondering how you actually monetize that, because in principle, that sounds great. In other words, you challenge the status quo, you do something different, and you want to be shot down, as far as I understand it. How do you turn that into a commercial offering, and how do you monetize it?
Ironically, the more I do it, the better my sort of commercial side of things goes, which might surprise you. It's not a direct thing, but people recognize that I'm not here to pay lip service to stuff. So I've gained a reputation for being the person you might go to if you are looking to do something disruptive and you're looking to really not just do it for real. So I find that the more I talk, the more sort of just inbound inquiries I'm getting for my business, which effectively is a consultancy or a think tank, somewhere in between the two.
Yep.
If you want to sort of summarize it in a single sentence. But the point is that if you need a new CRM system or something like that, then there are thousands of people you should go to before you come and talk to me. If you want to create something new that has no CRM system or that is trying something for the first time, that's where I can help, because the other side of me and what I'm doing is I'm trying to bring something to our industry that I call speculative design, or should I say, quite a few people call it speculative design. This is a fairly new discipline well, it's a new discipline to many parts of the world, but it's really about not just, we talk so much about agility and design thinking, and all of those things are great once you've figured out what the problem is and what the solution could look like. And it's all about going forward in a kind of hacker style, move fast, break things, try stuff, see what works, let the market decide. All good. Speculative design is about sort of looking in the other direction before starting that process and actually working out what the problem is. Einstein said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes of it thinking about the problem itself and only 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And I think just sort of taking time to consider a wider range of possibilities as a starting point and sort of being less vanilla in how we go about things and doing, there's an entire framework basically around being a bit more creative in understanding the problem and therefore understanding what solution could transpire that I'm trying to bring to our industry. So when I say now is the age of experimentation, I really am sort of putting my money where my mouth is on that, because I am basically building a framework for pharma to be more experimental without going into the realms of fantasy or science fiction, but being a lot more creative about solving some of the issues ahead of us.
So to that point, I've just made a couple of notes as you were saying that. So you're not talking about throwing ideas out on a whiteboard and just there's no bad ideas. Is it really, or is it that? Is it throwing everything on the whiteboard and just saying, how do we piece together these disparate parts and make some sense of it? There's no bad ideas, just throw it all up on the wall.
Well, I mean, that's obviously the brainstorming 101, and obviously brainstorms are a part of most design processes, and I would encourage them. But I think that even before you get to the whiteboard, ask yourself what's going to help you come up with better ideas for that whiteboard. What exposure have you given yourself? What new disciplines have you given yourself? What type of sort of out of the box thinking have you given yourself that's then going to allow you to come up with more creative ideas once you hit that whiteboard session? Even within pharma companies, I think that a lot of whiteboards are likely filled with lots of quite ideas that have been pursued before, and with lots of crossed out ideas of, oh, we can't do that because regulatory environments don't allow it, or whatever it is. I find that the biggest issue with pharma is it's just very blinkered. Take preventative medicine, for an example. The pharmaceutical industry generally assumes that preventative medicine, outside of vaccines, of course, is a very difficult thing to do, because when you think about making a drug and a clinical trial and approval processes, they don't actually fit very well with the whole idea of not getting a disease and being able to prove that.
Yep.
Whereas when you go to the technology industry and all of the Apples, Googles, and et cetera of the world, they see preventative medicine as a huge market opportunity. In fact, they're building their futures in many cases, certainly Apple and Google, around this idea of wellness, healthiness, and stopping yourself getting ill in the first place. So depending on where you sit, you have a completely different approach to the problem. Pharma can only see it's one way of, it can only see everything as a nail, because it's a hammer. And I think that's a real shame, because we all know that creating health in the world, is a multidisciplinary and very holistic activity. And if pharma describes itself as patient-centric or any of these words, then really it should be a little bit more imaginative in building that full suite of possibilities around patients and even non-patients. So yeah, we need to take the blinkers off.
I'm smiling because of the regulations, because I've had them so deeply inbred in me in the last 25 years working in this industry. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's that reluctance to change, but as much as working within a very tight framework, whatever those regulations might be, ICH, GCP, as defined by whichever regulatory agency you want to talk about, FDA, MHRA, EMA. It's how do we work within that very close framework. Sorry, James, you had a point you wanted to make.
What I was thinking, aside from the science and pharma side of things that you guys are much more embedded in than perhaps myself as a recruiter, I was thinking about you personally when you were explaining all of this. And I guess where this mentality and I guess sort of air of confidence has come from with regards to, your acceptance to being shut down and not having everyone like you, and working with just a handful of clients. So what is it about you? What's your background, in terms of your personal life that has prepared you for that? Because I think mindset is a big thing, and Adam and I have had several conversations with other individuals recently, and it's huge. And mental health is huge. Whereas you're kind of you're opening yourself up and saying, look, guys, this is me. Here's my out of the box crazy ideas. Like it or lump it, but if you like it, let's talk. Where's that kind of where's that?
I've got to be honest with you, it's not natural. It's not something that came easily. I was never the guy to stand up when I was younger and sort of take a stand. I've got no plans to enter politics and sort of throw myself over to the red or the blue corner and pin myself to one or the other. I'm probably a bit of a raging moderate, if anything. I think it's come from two things, probably. First one is utter boredom. I sat there for 17 years running these conferences, and conferences are obviously a place where the majority of people go there to sound clever, but not to say too much, so that they don't get fired by their compliance departments or whatever it is. So you get a lot of 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 content. And unfortunately, in an information overload world, 7 out of 10 ain't good enough anymore. To stand out and be brilliant, you actually have to hit the 9s and the 10s. And so an utter boredom and a sort of gradual realization that I could do probably a better job than many of the people going on stage. Not because they weren't capable. I find that on a one-to-one private conversation basis, people in our industry are actually pretty imaginative in many cases. It's just the sort of groupthink that kills them. So there's a combination of that. And then also, I think I've got a couple of role models from not within pharma. I tend to get most excited. I was, like many of us, I sort of came into the industry by accident, but I've kind of retained my love of design, which was actually my sort of first sort of passion, I guess, from a work point of view. And I grew up in this kind of dot-com era. So I was born in 1980. So I was about sort of 1920 when the dot-com era started to really hit. And I just saw this kind of boldness of entrepreneurial mindset. And ever since then, really, I suppose I've been very aligned to people who are willing to do what it takes and bust the status quo in the world of business.
Nice.
These are the people that I listen to on podcasts, that I read articles of every single day of my life. So when I go out there being a provocateur, I feel pretty lame. I feel pretty pathetic. I feel pretty docile in comparison to the people that I'm listening to and hearing about. And so again, I think it's that sort of context that you give yourself. If you just work in our industry, even without trying, your subconscious mind will push you in a certain way. And, I'm not saying that my way is always the best way. There are many details within our industry that I should understand better than I do. But it certainly gives me the boldness to suggest that there could be alternatives, put it that way.
Fair play, fair play. And look, I guess with that in mind then, because as you say, you probably, in a way, by your audience and your client base perhaps self-filters because of that mentality. But what type of...
I don't want everyone in a pharma company to love me or know me or talk to me. I only need 2%, and those are the ones I'm happy to work with.
So the guys that 2% or whatever percent it is, what sort of problems and challenges are they coming to you with?
Good question. Often it's, Paul, we kind of need to rethink this whole thing because we've thrown lots of stuff at the wall. None of it has stuck. Or we need to make a 50%, a 60, 70% change in our performance on X. Or we need to make a 50, 60, 70% budget cut on X. We basically need more of a reimagining than a re-engineering. Again, there are plenty of people that you would go to before you went to me if you're looking at, incremental but safe growth, right? If you want a guaranteed 10% a year, then, go and talk to McKinsey or one of that ilk. If you want a slightly riskier, perhaps, but chance at getting 50% a year, then use the processes that I'm talking about, the speculative design type of affair that's going to potentially bring a much better. But at least, I'm producing a process around it. So I'm not just sort of being a total cavalier here.
Yeah.
I'm you've still got the stabilizers on, but we are going down the steep mountain.
And can you back that up with actual numbers, actual demonstrable
Probably not at this
outcomes.
stage, if I'm completely honest with you. I mean, it's probably 7 or 8 months since I've started this, but I have got more than 20 clients in that time. So without ever trying to get a client. So that's just with all with approaches coming to me. So there's certainly desire. There's certainly the natural desire, I think, of a few people to genuinely try something new and try something different within our industry. And the more I'm just sort of known as a place to be that person, to gather that kind of even just the thinking. A lot of people are actually asking me to do simple research projects, find out what the hell's going on, find out what's possible. That's a very sort of simple entry point for a lot of people. So I've been doing a lot of that work in the last 6 months. So yeah, discovery is a huge part of it. And then frustration with the status quo is probably another big driver.
And as we said, I think there is enormous inertia within the pharma industry, within pharma biotech, and every supportive service around that. It's inertia. It's people sitting in comfy seats. I'm also not one of those people that sits in comfy seats. And similar to you, I think as a consultant that broadly covers many different aspects of servicing CROs, pharma, and biotech, it's that agility that you describe and speak to that I think resonates so loudly with me as well, because there are so many people out there within the industry that that are quite happy
You know
to
what,
just
Adam,
take
the
their
crazy
paycheck.
thing is, I'm hearing this from you, and I hear this from people almost every day.
Yeah.
It's just when they get there collectively, they become worried about, standing out, basically. They worry about upsetting somebody. And I often describe it as, in order to be innovative, you actually have to imagine you're on the top of a mountain. You've spent your whole life climbing that mountain. You've optimized your organization to get to that pinnacle. Then you realize you want to be on a different mountain. Well, the truth is that even if you've got long legs like I do, you can't just take a step from one mountain to another, right? You actually have to come down the mountain first. You have to unlearn. You have to do the opposite from what you've been doing before. That's the hardest bit. It's very easy to look upwards at another mountain peak and say, I want to get there. But do you want to destroy the work that you've been doing? Do you want the creative destruction? Do you want the unlearning, the embarrassment of doing something that's counterintuitive? That's where we are hugely failing. Happy to sort of talk about it on a one-to-one basis, even do it on a one-to-one basis, but do it in front of your boss, do it in front of your peer, do it in front of your family, who are going to be really put out if you lose your job, right?
I have, by the way, lost my job several times, and that's what drove me. That's what drove me to the disruptive mindset. It was,
right.
What have I got to do differently,
right,
to traverse this challenge and to not effectively reinvent myself, but effectively ensure that I have my boundaries that I can determine, but also to your point, take the lead from an industry that has given me so much and yet has restricted me so much.
Yeah.
And it's about crossing those boundaries, as you described. 20 clients in less than a year is quite extraordinary. You're putting out something very positive that's coming back to you in spades, but at the same time, you have your principles, and your principles are clearly driving the work that you're engaging with, the people that you're identifying with, who may think, to some, you may be a Marmite character. This really resonates, because from the Marmite, you get the people that love you, but similarly, I don't need to be everyone's best friend either. Same as you, by the sounds of it. You're quite happy to engage with people who want to engage with you. They don't. That's fine.
I'm really glad to hear you say this. But actually, Adam, I actually think it's kind of a natural process. We all talk about kind of the old eccentric village weirdo, right? So it's almost a sort of product of age. When you're a teenager, you actually care a lot about what everybody thinks, and you want to fit in.
Yep.
And as you get older, you get there. And I'm not going to say I'm more mature than anyone else, but perhaps you and I have almost removed the shackles a little bit earlier than we should have. And we're happy to be the eccentric in the village that goes their own way. And who knows, we need people like James to get us a job if we go completely off the wagon.
Well, this is where the interesting connection is, you see, because James has clearly identified you as someone who stands out. He also came and found me. We're all having a similar conversation. Right. We're having similar conversations all the time. And the point behind the podcast as much is to really understand and get under the skin of the changers, the movers, the disruptors. What is it that makes them different? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What's your passion? What's that thing that makes you you? Because that's really what we're trying to understand here, is how do you become that individual that stands out from the crowd? Because we can all be part of the crowd quite happily, and many people are. But I think what we're describing and what you're talking to is really the differentiator for you, the principles that drive it from your point of view. And also, I think that individually, how we connect as a collective as well.
What's interesting, guys, I guess before starting sort of Huxley Morton and my business, I was at a company, and I wasn't the same as all the other recruiters there. I stood out probably like a sore thumb, because I did things my own way. Probably I was a nightmare to manage, but I performed well, and my way worked. Not everyone liked it. It wasn't for everyone. So I'm kind of almost in the same boat as you guys, and I think that perhaps is what resonates to me when I look at people's profiles. I look for someone that stands out, and I look to build relationships. I look to network. So it's funny how you guys have both fallen into, I guess, my sort of grasp, over the last 18 months. But Paul, 18 or 18 to 20 clients in that amount of time period that's fantastic. All inbound stuff. So as we've said, you're clearly doing something right. Tell us I guess
I've never really stood back and thought about it, but I appreciate you saying that.
Any business owner, whether it's recruitment, biometrics as a consultant, any freelancer or an entrepreneur starting a business would absolutely jump at that.
The funny thing is, because I've been bootstrapping, I started it with zero in the bank, basically. And so to me, it feels like it's been going really slowly because I haven't been able to hire, as many staff as I would love to have been able to hire. I'm literally having to sort of take it a step-by-step process. Probably a good reason why I'm not getting much sleep at the moment, just doing all the work myself. Well, a lot of the work myself. I do actually have a few fantastic employees around me now, but it is, to me, it feels too slow. I feel like this pandemic moment of, the time is now to experiment and to actually get on with this kind of stuff. How much longer is it going to last? I don't know. I personally feel very impatient, excuse the pun. But that's something I really feel like I've got to get right. And by the way, on your earlier point, James, I think the very fact you're doing a podcast is setting you apart from other recruiters.
I've made that point to him before as well, and that's why
most recruiters don't want to know anything about the industry. They're just there to sort of make a transaction and then get on with it. And I think that in itself is certainly one reason why I'm very happy to be here today and just be with you.
And that was my motto previously. I guess it's my clients that pay the bills. But when I was at my old company, I realized that it was the job seekers and my network that made me who I was. So I sucked for 6 months. I did next to no business. And then 7 months, 7, 8, 9, I just went to the top of the company and stayed there for 3 years. And, was outbilling people that had teams of 6 resources for them, because all I invested in was just my network. And I'm doing the same thing on the pharmaceutical side of things now. And I just believe that what you put out, and Adam and I talk about this a lot, comes back.
Me too.
And I think that's going to happen with you. You think it seems slow. I done the same when I started my business, and again, 6 months in, I was thinking, need to pay the mortgage, and there's going to be letters coming through, etc. But eventually, it all turned good, and there's a season to sow and there's a season to reap, and your season will certainly come. But any outsider looking at you and your business would think it's been going 2 minutes. It's kind of you've not even scratched the surface. And I think we've got a mutual connection in Mike at Idea Pharma.
Mike Ray, great.
And I know that his business it was himself almost as a family business for a long time, and then it's just it exploded. And it's because if you just have some integrity, do what you know is right, eventually it will just all come good.
I'm listening.
You guys. I didn't come here for the pep talk, but I'm very glad to have got one.
I also listen to a lot of podcasts, Paul, and James and I regularly talk about some of the podcasts that we both enjoy, and I think it's that personal insight that you gain from other people's successes and failures that really can drive and define the decisions that you then ultimately make, because we're not born with wisdom. We have to gain it from somewhere, and if it doesn't come from your parents and the people immediately around you, there has never been an easier time to learn from other people's mistakes and successes. And if you're willing to learn, as you said, keep learning, keep doing the right things, keep doing the things that on principle are the best things that you believe in, they absolutely reap rewards. And I tell you, you resonate so strongly with me, because I did a recent review, funnily enough, with my accountant, and we were looking back at the year, and I had no idea how many clients I'd also worked with. And it was far more than I'd actually thought, because there was effectively what I thought was a one-on-one engagement. It turns out it's more of a portfolio career. And what you're describing is a portfolio career. That's what most people would aspire to if they're running a business. Now, whether it's you as an individual or a team of people behind you, you need to ride out those waves and the peaks and troughs. So you have to have a portfolio of clients that you can go back to. But beyond that, you're not even knocking on the doors and you're managing to do that. So that should speak volumes to the point. It's really staggering.
I find that incredible. So, for me, that's great. But look, what are the biggest challenges that you have faced? So, for me, business, how's business going, and what are the biggest challenges you faced along the way, and what has that taught you about yourself?
Right. Well, I've already mentioned
learning and relearning, and how's that gone for you?
Yeah. There's a couple of things on a sort of personal and tactical level. You probably discovered this already. I'm not a natural delegator, and that is really holding me back. I've even got a situation where I've hired staff and I'm not giving them the work to do. Bonkers, frankly. And there's always that mentality of do it yourself and get it done right, which obviously is a disastrous policy because it's often not even true. And people can astound you when you give them the trust and the freedom to actually go about things, and they can do a job much better than you ever could. You're halfway through a difficult big job in the middle of working with a client, and you want to sort of see it through. You get this kind of railroad mentality, which I think is very, very dangerous. And I am in danger of, I'm endangering my own health by not sort of delegating properly, and obviously things fall through cracks, balls get dropped, and no matter how hard you try, you can't do everything. You're not superhuman, right? So that's a very big thing. From a kind of more strategic point of view, I think that I need to sort of find a way still of being able to capture almost sort of, well, there's two things. I need to sort of be able to tell the world what I'm doing, which I kind of feel like I hate sort of advertising myself. It's one of the reasons why I guess I'm more predisposed to sort of doing a more kind of disruptive type commentary when I do speak. So I'm terrible at selling anything, frankly.
I mean, me and Adam clearly see it. I mean, if you were looking for a job in this sort of space, I would be able to sell you in an instant, I think.
That's very kind of you. I'll let you know. But no, the truth is that I find it very difficult to establish a positioning within the industry. And yes, people are coming to me, but it's almost sort of accidental. I feel like I need to generate a people still know me as an event organizer, I think. And to be able to establish that within industry is very key. And then to be able to have the sort of way of systematically growing in the right kind of direction, I think is something I still very much have to figure out. So there's definitely a few challenges I have yet to overcome. I feel like I'm making progress. I'm doing a lot of trial and error, which is the best way of learning, and managed to keep everyone happy pretty much. But I'm not saying it's been plain sailing, that's for sure.
At least you're kind of aware of these things, though, Paul. I think there's so many other people that I speak to. Sometimes it's the business leader, and I'm talking to them about recruitment, and I can maybe see the cracks as to why there's turnover in a business.
Right.
They may not, because sometimes it's them.
Are you honest with them though? Do you tell them? I mean, that's an interesting question as well, because
I do.
Some clients will respect you more for that.
I do, and I think sometimes it's shot me in the foot. But I think that's again why I left my old business as kind of the top producer and decided I wanted to go on my own, because I didn't want to have to put up with any red tape bullshit, to be honest. That was it didn't suit me. The organization got big, and I was, they were trying to tie me in with, equity schemes and things. It just drove me out the door more and more. So that's, one thing that I'll happily just walk away from things these days. It's just not worth the aggravation. So I think, that's good that you're able to, be aware of that. So what's the plans for you guys at Impatient moving forward? How many of you is there in the team now? How many are you going to be delegating to down the line? And what are your plans?
There's 6 of us now, which is good. That's up from 2 at the start of the year. So that's, still not very big, but a lot bigger than we were.
Yeah.
I think that my dream is to be able to be that Pharma Provocateur a bit more. I feel like I have it's funny because we were talking earlier about putting ourselves out there and being a bit provocative. What I've been asking for our leaders of healthcare organizations, particularly pharma companies, to do for years is to put themselves out there. And they're actually starting to do it, starting to take off the mask, as I call it. But it's really only very recently. And to sort of show that human side, to talk about the future, pharma company leaders only ever talk about the present or the past. I'm not sure if you've noticed. And to actually get out there and inspire people. We work theoretically in the most emotive industry of all, right? Why is it that an Elon Musk who's building cars and power cells and actually quite tunnels underground and actually quite boring stuff has been able to capture the imagination? Why is it a tech company that started out selling books can inspire us with talks of delivering packages via drone? And, by the way, that was 6 years ago. Has anyone been delivered the package by drone? No, but it doesn't bloody matter, does it? Because it got you thinking, and it got you thinking, oh, this Amazon company is quite futuristic and forward thinking, isn't it? We need people to work in healthcare and talk about the possibilities of healthcare, the ideas, and all of that good stuff. I've been shouting at healthcare leaders to do it. Of course, they're safety first. They don't want to stick their head above the parapet. Now I've kind of realized I kind of just have to do it myself. It almost sort of do it and leave a sort of path behind me for others to sort of do it in my wake, as it were, and potentially much more effectively than I can, because I don't run a big company, so who the hell am I? Whereas if they stand up and say something, it can be a lot more meaningful. I just think that I actually look at Pfizer when they released their vaccine. I actually think they did it in a very good way, because they did it in a very human way. The CEO got up and people, the news almost came out via social media and individual employees rather than by press release. And that's what I think drove a strong take-up of the vaccine when it came out. If it had been done in this typical, very opaque, press release, dry black ink kind of way, then I don't think we would have had as much of an impact. I think that other companies that didn't release their vaccines in a stronger way haven't had as much take up. So I do think that the way in which we communicate, the way in which we harness the emotional range that is at our disposal is something that is necessary. So when you ask me what I want to do in the future, I want to be able to have a very capable team that can execute under the principles that I'm designing. But for me personally, to be able to spend a bit more time looking externally at the world instead of internally at my own little fiefdom, and just sort of get in everyone's grills, basically, be that provocateur.
You said a couple of really, really pertinent things. And at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about how you disrupt with predictions, and you make predictions. What's the difference in your mind? I'm just curious. What's the difference between making predictions and manifesting, namely saying what you're going to do and making it happen? Because it sounds like what you're describing there is really that pharma need to disrupt themselves, that the external messages need to be stronger and more future-proofed, or at least future-headed, rather than in the safe now state that that they tend to center around. That tends to be in their safe zone, doesn't it?
I think there's this strange idea that whatever you say in pharma, you've got to be able to prove that you can do. I have this thing, I call it the 4 A's. It starts with ambition. So the more ambitious your idea is in the beginning, then the more attention it actually garners. If you say you're going to put a man on the moon, as people did in the 70s, that was a very interesting thing. The world's media rushed to it. If you say you're going to cut carbon emissions by 50% or some big ambitious number, then the world's media rush to that. And, you get the sort of Greta Thunberg's appearing of the world. So the ambition drives the attention, and then the attention actually drives the accountability. Once you've got everyone staring at you, you can't just fade into the shadows. And then that's obviously, that accountability is what drives the action at the end of the day. Wow. So if you think about, I referred to someone like Elon Musk earlier. He obviously gets out there and says outlandish stuff about how he'd like to get a man on the moon, on Mars within a time frame that all of us go, what? He wants to, do all sorts of things. And whether he succeeds or fails, and he does fail a lot of the time, it attracts that attention, it attracts that accountability. And, he doesn't get away with it every time. We've seen him, on the wrong side of the news a lot, but his share price is doing pretty well. So, it's not like he hasn't attracted a lot of positive attention on that front, people willing to buy into his ideas. And then, that's what drives the action. So Elon Musk famously does not have a marketing department. Why? Because he starts with the ambition, and that naturally draws the attention. So he doesn't need one. So I'd love a pharma company to put something out there that they don't know if they're going to necessarily achieve. Jeff Bezos doesn't know he's going to get drones out there. It hasn't happened. He still said it.
But every clinical trial starts with a synopsis, with this is what we want to achieve, and yet I think they're within those confines that we've spoken about, aren't they? We're not aiming for the moon. We're saying right now, in the context of COVID, for example, we want as many people to be vaccinated as quickly as possible to reduce transmissibility of COVID, and also to reduce hospitalizations and ultimately deaths as a result of COVID. I think coming back to that point, though, is that enough? It doesn't sound like you think that's enough, but actually, if we look in the context of what's been achieved by the pharma industry in the last year to 18 months, that's been an absolute total mindset shift, hasn't it? It's been a paradigm shift in the time that we've experienced this. I've seen a drug come to market and be in my arm, 2 jabs in my arm, in the period of time that I never, ever would have anticipated. I've worked on trials and it's taken 10 years before those drugs have come to market. And, when people asked me when I thought there would be a vaccine in our arms, I was saying 2 or 3 years at the very best. I couldn't
and even that was,
and that was a push.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, in that last period of 18 months, I'm actually working on those vaccines now. I could never have anticipated that opportunity and be at that forefront where it never existed before. There are extraordinary opportunities, but as I say, coming back to that disrupting piece, it is, wow, look at what we're doing now as a humanity. We're in the greatest clinical trial that's ever been.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Now, I don't want to sort of equate the incredible performance of all the science that's been done with just to sort of saying it from a sort of almost PR point of view. It's obviously a far more than that. But I think that if you look at what some of the leaders of the organizations that did succeed, actually, if you sort of watch the documentaries, read the sort of transcripts of meeting minutes that are sort of being released now, you can see that this was the sort of conversation they were having. Why can't we do it? And why can't we run things in parallel just because we've never done it before? Necessity is the mother of invention, and when you've got a gun held against your head, you will do extraordinary things quite potentially. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a modus operandi for running a business. We should not be forcing people into horrible situations where they've got to perform in that kind of way, but we definitely have to find ways of being more imaginative by stating more ambitious goals. That is definitely for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that's why you've hit the sweet spot. The sweet spot is now, because people are changing and people's mindsets are changing, and you've identified that and you're acting upon it. And you're recognizing it and calling it for what it is. I don't think science has ever been in this place before, and I don't think it will ever be the same again because of the transformations that we've experienced. And this is only in one particular area. When people put their heads together, we can get a cure for cancer in a year if we needed to. This is what it shows to me, and I'm sure it does to you as well. We can put our minds to some incredible things when academics, pharma, and R&D work together under one umbrella, where there isn't necessarily profit being the only outcome or the primary outcome. There is something extraordinary that can be created, and I think you've absolutely hit it at the right time, because by the sounds of it, you're asking the questions that people should be asking themselves anyway, because we've got a different rule book now. The old one's been chucked away, hasn't it?
It's going to be interesting to watch, isn't it, Adam, with Paul and Impatient Health, I think. Definitely.
Well, I mean, you say, I'm in the right place doing the right thing. Again, I kind of feel like I'm scratching the surface. To me, There's just so much unfulfilled. I mean, look at it. The world has suddenly become aware of the clinical trial and drug development process. There is now probably a significant portion of people who think it's a good idea to support medical research that otherwise wouldn't have crossed their radar. How are we taking advantage of that right now? I don't think we are. We've all been turned on to the idea of climate change, that we shouldn't just, dump chemicals in the middle of a beautiful scenic environment. We shouldn't just throw away stuff on the ground willy-nilly. We need to be good citizens by being aware of climate change. Why aren't we being good citizens also by contributing to medical research? How does a member of the public contribute their personal data to getting the next series of vaccines or the next series of medicines? There's currently no convenient way. You've got patients willing to give their data, you've got researchers who desperately need that data, and you've got people who are willing to fund it, yet somehow that triangle of people can't be brought together in a convenient way still, despite everything we've just said. And it's just so wasteful today. How much money is spent trying to identify patients to take part in a clinical trial and keep them on board? It's stupendous. So I see our problems as only just starting to get solved. This is early days. I actually think generally pharma is a young industry, not a mature one at all. We haven't even evolved as companies. Most pharma companies are pretty much the same. Okay, that started to change a little bit recently, but 10 years ago, you could swap the logos and they'd look exactly the same, right? So we are immature. If you think of the wide variety of species and in this sort of widening habitat of possibility, we have a lot of evolving to do.
Impressive to hear all of your insights, Paul. And I know that I'm going to be, I guess, following yourself and the business to see weird and wonderful things you come out with. But look, we've reached the point of the show. A quick fire round for you, just to get a couple of insights about you, your thoughts, the man behind the tagline, I guess. So look, I guess I'll kick us off here. Look, what is, I would say, the number one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
It's probably something around being willing to sort of trust others and be willing to ask for help, quite simply. I think I try to do things on my own far too much, and I don't let others in, almost. And I think this is not just a business thing. This is a life thing, and almost being willing to share my life a little bit more, and being sort of someone told me when I was a teenager, if you rely on other people for your happiness, if you need them to sort of compliment you everywhere you go, whatever it is, then you'll never be truly happy. And I still believe that, but I also believe that you should be willing to share and trust other people. Otherwise, you're not going to have a life in the first place. So that's probably something I'd try and teach myself. Don't take that piece of advice about almost sort of closing off other people's opinions. I took that one too much to heart, if you like. So yeah.
Good advice.
I'll follow on. We've talked about podcasts, we've talked about other resources, but we would love to know, what books are you reading right now, and where do you find your motivators? What would you recommend to the audience about the books that you're reading? What's on your bookshelf right now?
What is on my bookshelf? Far too much, as you can probably imagine. Lots of unread stuff. It's funny when you think of what's the book I'd recommend. It would be, I come back to this book that I don't recommend to everyone, but I think it's very interesting. You've probably heard of it. It's called Power, or the 48 Laws of Power, and it's the most ruthless and frightening book of advice that you could ever be given. It's funny because all the example, when you read a modern book, it talks about sort of business or life, and they give you examples of where someone's maybe lost a bit of money or lost their job, and this one tends to use examples from sort of medieval era. So whenever something gets somewhere wrong, inevitably someone gets beheaded or several thousand people lose their lives or something like that. So it's not for the faint-hearted. It's got chapters like crush your enemy totally and how to create a cult-like following and, never outshine the master and all this kind of stuff that could be used for both good and bad. It describes itself as amoral as a book, so you could use it. So that's why I don't recommend it to everybody. I wouldn't certainly want some people getting their hands on this book.
That's certainly provocative, I would say.
It's,
from the provocateur, that's provocative.
It's probably a book that I might come back to like every sort of 2 or 3 years and re-look at again as a sort of source of inspiration. So there you go.
Even the book recommendation, admitting that it's Marmite, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. It's not for everyone. Look,
you'll probably all love it, but feel a bit sick for it afterwards. Is how I feel. It's definitely it's like watching a horror. It's like loving a zombie movie or something like that. You feel a bit sort of questioning of your own sense of morality afterwards if you do enjoy it. But there you go. It's definitely an interesting read.
I like it. I love following a trend on that one, Paul. But look,
and there's another recommendation. Probably there's a guy called Scott Galloway who I listen to a lot on the podcasts. I think he's one of the people that I listen to, and I mentioned earlier that he's one of those people that makes me feel tame in what I do to approach the pharma industry.
Good stuff.
Perfect. Thank you.
I guess in terms of following trends and being yourself. As you say, one of the ambitions is to now actually grow the business, release some of that work that you are hoarding and driving yourself crazy with by the sounds of things at points. But look, what are the top 3 qualities that you value most when looking to build your team?
I think authenticity, or as I probably prefer to put it, don't be fake. I just find that most people are fake in so many aspects of their lives. James, you'll experience it when people go for interviews. I find that the people that put on the front and who almost try the hardest are the least trustworthy. This goes right back to exactly what I was saying about being more human and a bit more ambitious and inspirational in how we talk about pharma. So I try to sort of project that internally as well. I am myself. I've got nothing to hide. My aim is to be, as normal as I can. It's actually my approach to lots of stuff. When I moderate a public webinar or a session, I just act normally. When I speak on a podcast, I hope I act pretty normally as well. And hopefully,
it's refreshing. I think for me, I value that.
I just don't understand why people put up a front, because as humans, we've evolved to sort of work with people who sort of tessellate with us the best, who sort of act in the same way we do. So that's definitely one of the top 3, if not top 1. I think that's absolutely key. Second thing I think is probably more advice for pharma than it is necessarily just advice for myself, but look outside of your own 4 walls. I just find that people try to get inspired by looking at a blank sheet of paper. It doesn't work like that. You have to go and expose yourself, experience stuff. You never even know what career you want unless you've tried a few things in life, and don't expect to find the answer straight away either. Just, as I said, I used to work as a designer, or at least want to be a designer. And I used to read all these books about where to get good ideas, and it's all about just putting yourself in different situations and being willing to sort of do that. So get out there is another important value, I think.
Great stuff.
We
won't push you for one more, because you've given us.
I feel like I've been talking way too much.
I've got a very good sense of what you look for there, and I think the differences of experiences probably, again, it's a little bit out there. When I recruit, people normally want people just like themselves, so I think that one is, again, out of the box, and I like it. But look, Adam, I'll throw over to you.
Yeah, I mean, well, you talked about authenticity, and I think throughout this whole conversation, you've been entirely authentic, Paul, because it's not as if you said one thing and done another. You are completely consistent in everything that you said, from the book choices.
I don't think I've got the brain power to sort of run 2 different narratives. And
I certainly don't. So again, that really resonates. You be true to yourself, and you'll be true to everyone. And I don't tell porcupines for the same reason, because I can't remember what I can't remember. I'm just not that smart. The other question we had for you was, what do you do when you're not working? By the sounds of it, you're working quite a lot, but what is it
Yeah, I'm terrible at
is your motivation at the
differentiating.
weekend?
I'm terrible at differentiating between work and life, I've got to be honest. So yeah, that's pretty bad. What do I really enjoy doing? I get a lot of inspiration from music. I was actually a musician for the most of my life, piano player, and you know, I've always surrounded myself with musicians for some reason. So I enjoy a lot of that stuff. Yeah, it's not through trying. It's just natural. It's just natural again, you know. And I talked about design. I've been obsessed with design since I was 10 years old. Okay, I was a weird teenager, I admit it. I don't know why, but I've always been interested. So I like to renovate properties, which sounds very strange because it's a weird hobby to have. It's a very expensive hobby, as you can imagine. I have spent a lot of my life borrowing a lot of money from people who have money in order to fulfill this particular hobby. I love turning a wreck into something, you know, amazing. And ironically, as soon as it's done, I'm bored. I walk away, right? Like if I've done it to my own house, I then move house at that point when it's done. So yeah, I've got a strange mentality of wanting to sort of do the work and then get bored when it's done. So yeah, I don't know. Some people would say that everything I've mentioned so far is just another form of work. I think I'm a little bit sad, if I'm honest. But yeah, I like going for long walks. I'm not much of a traveler, but I love sort of the wilderness. And I grew up in Norway, so I love the whole lakes and mountains sort of thing.
Which part of Norway?
I was actually in the south, down a city called Stavanger, but of course, the great thing about Norway is you can drive to a ski slope or you can get into the crazy, you know, mountainous areas within an hour of the city. So I guess that's probably, I'll probably never retire, but if I do, it'll probably be somewhere like that.
we could have a whole different conversation about Scandinavia, because I've also spent quite a bit of time there as well. But
nice.
I'll pass on to James, because I think he wants to he wants to tie it up with our last question, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I guess to wrap things up, Paul. I'm sure I know the answer.
Why don't you tell me first then?
Number one golden rule in life and business, and I think I could sum it up. It probably begins with an A, but over to you.
Well, it's either ambition, authenticity, or it's one of my 4 A's that I said before, basically. Or it's authenticity.
I was thinking authenticity. So,
you know what the funny thing is, I've never thought about it before, and it's almost I needed this conversation to figure it out. So I'm very grateful to you guys for helping me get there. You know, now I'm almost like, oh yeah, maybe it is. So.
Sometimes we just need to talk these things through, because of course, as soon as it goes from here to our ears, it goes into our brain and it becomes embedded. And what you've described, I think, is exactly that. You know, it's the speaking it and making it a thing. And that's exactly what you've brilliantly described, I think, today, because you
I want to make it clear that I'm not saying authenticity though because it's the morally right thing to do. I'm not trying to be all holier than thou. I think I'm saying it because of other reasons, that it actually gets you through life in so many other ways. I think now we're talking, and the more people are talking, and I didn't touch on this earlier, but actually what's interesting is presumably the majority of the work that you're doing right now is remote. So you're not even seeing the people that you're working with. So there has to be a level of authenticity that was never there before, because if you can't connect in this manner, then you won't be able to connect when you're in the real room with those people. And there will be a different energy in the room, won't there? Exactly. I think it's the same. Sorry to go back to our industry, pharma, but obviously getting patient input is really key in so much of what we do. And if you don't have a more authentic way of communicating with those patients when you do, then you're never going to get the full range of understanding. So, you know, if we're talking through only a Zoom lens, you don't get to observe people in their real lives anymore. You've just got a very small window. And so if you can break down barriers with authenticity and just being yourself, basically, then you're going to get a much better understanding and response in the first place.
I'm pointing here and here, because that's my authentic self. That's what I get up for in the morning. There you go.
And you put it in your video screen as well, which is fantastic. You know, that's a great icebreaker. So yeah, You're a human.
That's my authenticity, but it absolutely resonates. Absolutely. You got renovation on my mind now.
Property, isn't it?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Well, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And
no worries.
as I say, for anyone who wants to reach out to you, as I say, I could barely avoid you on LinkedIn, but what's the best place to get hold of you?
Probably on LinkedIn. You can also send me an email, paul@impatient.health if you wish. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest. So go there.
Great stuff. Well, look, thanks again for joining us on the Huxley Morton podcast.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you for the invite. It's been great fun.
Good stuff.